The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before an ornate mirror in her dressing room. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate silver earrings that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. Today was no ordinary day. It was the coronation of King Charles III, and the entire world would be watching. In another room, Prince William was being helped into his ceremonial uniform by his valet. The deep blue fabric of his Royal Air Force dress uniform was immaculate, adorned with golden braiding and numerous medals that told the story of his years of service. He caught his reflection in the mirror and took a deep breath. The weight of the moment pressed upon his shoulders, not just the physical weight of his ceremonial sword and decorations, but the emotional significance of witnessing his father's crowning. Meanwhile, their 3 children were experiencing their own mixture of excitement and nervousness. 10-year-old Prince George, dressed in his miniature formal attire, practiced his solemn walk in the hallway. He understood the importance of the day and felt proud to be part of such a historic moment. His younger sister, Princess Charlotte, twirled in her beautiful white dress, her hair perfectly styled with a small tiara that sparkled in the morning light. She couldn't contain her excitement about riding in the grand carriage. 8-year-old Prince Louis, the youngest of the 3, was bouncing with energy despite his formal clothes. His parents had spent weeks preparing him for this day, explaining how important it was to behave properly during the long ceremony. The little prince had been practicing sitting still, and had even rehearsed his bow for grandfather Charles. Catherine made final adjustments to her stunning Alexander McQueen coat dress in royal blue. The designer had worked for months to create the perfect balance of elegance and tradition. Her hat, adorned with delicate silver leaves, complemented the ensemble beautifully. She wore the George VI festoon necklace, a precious piece that connected her to the royal history she was now part of. The household staff moved efficiently around the cottage, ensuring every detail was perfect. Security personnel conducted final checks, while the children's nanny made sure the young royals had everything they needed for the long day ahead. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, but also careful and precise. Nothing could be left to chance on such an important occasion. William joined his wife in the main drawing room, and for a moment they stood together in comfortable silence. They both understood the magnitude of the day ahead. This coronation would mark a new chapter in British history, and their family would play a central role in the ceremony that would be remembered for generations. The sound of vehicles arriving outside indicated that their transportation was ready. Royal protection officers spoke quietly into their radios, confirming that the route to Westminster Abbey was secure. Catherine gathered her small purse and took one last look in the mirror, while William checked his ceremonial sword was properly positioned. Their children assembled in the entrance hall, looking like something from a fairy tale. George stood tall and serious, understanding his role as second in line to the throne. Charlotte practically glowed with excitement, and Louis, despite his youth, seemed to grasp that this was a very special day for their family. As they prepared to leave Adelaide Cottage, Catherine took William's arm. The couple exchanged a meaningful look. They were ready to support King Charles III on his coronation day and to represent the future of the British monarchy. The children gathered around their parents, and together, the family of 5 stepped out into the bright morning light, beginning their journey to one of the most important days in recent royal history. The morning preparations were complete, and the Wales family was ready to make their grand entrance at Westminster Abbey, carrying with them the hopes and traditions of a nation watching with pride and anticipation. The gleaming black state car waited outside Adelaide Cottage, its polished surface reflecting the morning sunshine. Prince William helped Catherine into the luxurious vehicle, while their protection officers ensured the children were safely secured. The leather seats were soft and comfortable, but the atmosphere inside was filled with quiet excitement and anticipation. As their convoy pulled away from their home, they could see people already lining the streets despite the early hour. Royal fans had traveled from all corners of the United Kingdom and beyond, some camping overnight to secure the best viewing spots. Many held Union Jack flags, while others carried banners with messages of support for the new king and the royal family. Princess Charlotte pressed her face to the window, her eyes wide with wonder at the growing crowds. She had never seen so many people gathered in one place, all there to celebrate her grandfather's special day. Prince Louis bounced in his seat, pointing excitedly at the colorful decorations that adorned every lamppost and building along their route. Prince George sat more quietly, observing everything with the serious demeanor that had become his trademark at public events. He understood that today was different from other royal occasions. This was history in the making, and he was witnessing it firsthand. His parents had explained to him many times how rare coronations were, with the last one happening before any of them were born. Catherine held William's hand as they traveled through the familiar streets of London, now transformed into a festival of celebration. Red, white, and blue bunting stretched between buildings, and enormous screens had been erected in parks and squares so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The sight was both overwhelming and deeply moving. Their route took them past landmarks they knew well, Buckingham Palace, where crowds 10 deep pressed against the barriers, hoping to catch a glimpse of any royal car that passed. The Victoria Memorial was surrounded by a sea of people, many wearing crowns and tiaras in tribute to the occasion. Street vendors sold commemorative items, and the atmosphere was more like a carnival than a formal state occasion. As they approached Westminster, the crowds grew even thicker. Police officers on horseback helped manage the thousands of spectators, while photographers positioned themselves strategically along the barriers. The sound of cheering could be heard even through the heavy glass of their vehicle, creating a constant background of celebration and excitement. William pointed out historical details to his children as they passed famous buildings and monuments. He explained how their great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had traveled this same route on her coronation day in 1953, and how their grandfather had waited his entire life for this moment. The children listened intently, beginning to understand the deep traditions they were part of. The security presence was impressive, but discreet. Hundreds of officers lined the route, while others watched from rooftops and hidden positions. Despite the massive crowds, everything moved smoothly according to the carefully planned schedule. Every detail had been rehearsed multiple times to ensure the day would proceed without any problems. Catherine adjusted her hat and checked her appearance in her compact mirror. The world's media would capture every moment of their arrival at Westminster Abbey, and she wanted to look perfect for the historical photographs that would be treasured for generations. She felt the weight of representing not just her family, but the entire nation on this momentous day. As Westminster Abbey came into view, rising majestically above the surrounding buildings, the family fell silent. The ancient stones of the abbey had witnessed nearly 1,000 years of royal ceremonies, and today they would add another chapter to that incredible history. The building was decorated with beautiful flowers and golden banners that fluttered in the gentle breeze. Their car began to slow as they approached the final stretch of their journey. Soon they would step out onto the red carpet and walk through the doors of Westminster Abbey, where King Charles III waited to be crowned in a ceremony that would echo through the centuries. The journey through London had been magical, filled with the love and support of the British people. Now, as they prepared for their grand arrival, the Wales family was ready to play their part in one of the most important days in modern British history. The magnificent Gothic towers of Westminster Abbey rose before them like ancient guardians of history. As their state car glided to a stop at the Great West Door, Prince William could see the red carpet stretching up the stone steps, lined with perfectly positioned guards in their ceremonial uniforms. The moment had arrived for their grand entrance to witness his father's coronation. A royal aide stepped forward to open Catherine's door, and she emerged gracefully, her royal blue coat dress catching the morning light beautifully. The assembled photographers captured every angle as she paused for a moment, allowing her outfit to settle perfectly. Her hat sat elegantly on her styled hair, and the precious royal jewelry she wore sparkled brilliantly against the ancient abbey walls. Prince William followed, cutting an impressive figure in his RAF dress uniform. The deep blue fabric was adorned with golden braiding and service medals that caught the sunlight. His ceremonial sword hung at his side, and his posture was straight and dignified as he took his place beside his wife. Together, they represented the next generation of the British monarchy with grace and authority. The children emerged from the vehicle one by one, each looking like they had stepped from a storybook. Prince George, now 10 years old, walked with surprising maturity for his age. His formal attire was perfectly tailored, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence that would serve him well as a future king. He looked around at the massive abbey with wide eyes, understanding the historical significance of the moment. Princess Charlotte practically glowed in her beautiful white dress, her hair styled with a delicate tiara that caught the morning light. She held her small white purse carefully and smiled at the cameras, her natural charm shining through. At 8 years old, she seemed completely at ease with the attention and pageantry surrounding her. Young Prince Louis, the baby of the family, looked adorable in his miniature formal wear. Despite being only 5 years old, he had been well prepared for this moment and walked carefully up the red carpet between his siblings. His parents watched him closely, ready to guide him if needed, but he seemed determined to do his part perfectly. The sound of the Abbey bells rang out across London, their deep, resonant tones marking the significance of the moment. Hundreds of distinguished guests were already seated inside the ancient building, including heads of state, members of European royalty, and other dignitaries from around the world. The Wales family would take their places among this gathering of the most important people on earth. As they walked up the stone steps, Catherine adjusted Prince Louis's collar gently, while William placed a reassuring hand on Prince George's shoulder. The family moved as one unit, their timing perfect and their appearance flawless. Every step was captured by cameras that would share this moment with millions of viewers worldwide. The great west door of Westminster Abbey stood open before them, revealing the magnificent interior that had been decorated with thousands of flowers and golden banners. The ancient nave stretched before them, filled with the soft sound of the choir rehearsing and the gentle murmur of arriving guests taking their seats. Royal ushers, dressed in scarlet and gold, stood ready to guide them to their designated places. The Wales family would sit in positions of honor, close enough to witness every moment of the coronation ceremony, but positioned to show proper respect for the new king and queen consort. Catherine took William's arm as they paused at the threshold of the abbey. Behind them, London continued its celebration, with thousands of people gathered in the streets and parks to watch the ceremony on giant screens. Inside the abbey, nearly 2,000 guests waited for the ceremony to begin, including many of the most powerful and influential people in the world. The children stayed close to their parents, understanding that they were about to witness something that would be remembered for centuries. The weight of tradition and history seemed to fill the very air around them as they prepared to enter the sacred space where kings and queens had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. Prince Louis looked up at his parents with trust and excitement, while Princess Charlotte smoothed her dress one final time. Prince George took a deep breath, ready to watch his grandfather receive the crown that would one day be his own responsibility to wear. Together, the Wales family stepped across the threshold into Westminster Abbey, beginning their participation in one of the most important ceremonies in British history. The ancient stones welcomed them as they joined the gathering that would witness King Charles III's transformation from heir to sovereign. The moment the Wales family stepped inside Westminster Abbey, they were enveloped by an atmosphere unlike anything they had ever experienced. The ancient stone walls seemed to whisper with the voices of history, and the magnificent Gothic architecture soared above them, creating a sense of awe and reverence that took their breath away. Thousands of flowers created a breathtaking display throughout the abbey. White roses, yellow daffodils, and blue delphiniums had been arranged in elaborate displays that complemented the golden banners hanging from the historic columns. The scent of the flowers mixed with the ancient smell of old stone and wood, creating an atmosphere that felt both sacred and celebratory. Catherine marveled at the incredible transformation of the abbey. She had been here many times before, but today it looked like something from a fairy tale. Every detail had been planned to perfection, from the silk carpets that covered the ancient floors to the specially designed lighting that made the stained glass windows glow like jewels. The children walked quietly beside their parents, their eyes wide with wonder. Prince George had studied pictures of previous coronations in his lessons, but seeing the actual space prepared for such a momentous occasion was completely different. The coronation chair, which had been used for royal coronations for over 700 years, sat waiting near the altar, ready to hold his grandfather during the most important moment of the ceremony. Princess Charlotte was fascinated by the ladies in their beautiful gowns and elaborate hats. She had never seen so many tiaras and jewels in one place, and the sight made her feel like she was in the middle of the most elegant party ever held. She walked carefully, making sure her own small tiara stayed perfectly in place. Prince Louis held tightly to his mother's hand, overwhelmed by the grandeur surrounding him. The abbey was filled with more important people than he had ever seen together, and he could sense that something very special was about to happen. He had practiced sitting quietly for weeks, and he was determined to make his parents proud. As they were guided to their seats, the family passed close to other members of European royalty, who had traveled from across the continent to witness the historic ceremony. Kings and queens from Spain, Sweden, Norway, and other nations nodded respectfully to William and Catherine, acknowledging their important position within the extended royal family. Their seats were positioned perfectly to give them a clear view of the altar where King Charles III would soon be crowned. The ancient coronation chair sat majestically nearby, its carved lions and historic wood polished to perfection. Above them, the soaring arches of the abbey created a sense of reaching toward heaven, appropriate for a ceremony that would ask for divine blessing on the new king. The sound of the organ began to fill the space, its deep, rich tones resonating through every stone of the ancient building. The choir, dressed in their traditional red cassocks and white surplices, took their positions in the choir stalls. Their voices would soon fill the abbey, with music that had been sung at royal coronations for centuries. William looked around at the assembled dignitaries and felt the weight of the moment settling upon his shoulders. World leaders, archbishops, members of parliament, and representatives from every corner of the British Commonwealth had gathered to witness his father's crowning. The responsibility of representing the monarchy with dignity and grace felt heavier than ever. Catherine adjusted her children's positions slightly, making sure they could all see clearly, but were sitting properly for the long ceremony ahead. She whispered gentle reminders about staying quiet and still, knowing that the eyes of the world would be upon them throughout the service. The abbey continued to fill with the most distinguished guests from around the globe. Prime ministers, presidents, and other heads of state took their designated places, while members of the British nobility filled the ancient pews. The sound of quiet conversation mixed with the organ music, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and excitement. Soon the processional would begin, and King Charles III would make his entrance into this sacred space. The Wales family was ready to witness history in the making. Surrounded by nearly 1,000 years of royal tradition and pageantry, the ancient stones of Westminster Abbey had seen many coronations, but this one would be special. As the family settled into their seats, they knew they were about to witness a ceremony that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come, marking the beginning of a new era in British history. The magnificent sound of trumpets filled Westminster Abbey, announcing that the most important moment in British royal history for over 70 years was about to begin. Prince William felt his heart beat, faster as he realized his father was about to enter the abbey to be crowned, King of the United Kingdom and 15 other Commonwealth realms. The great procession began with church officials in their elaborate ceremonial robes, followed by representatives from across the Commonwealth carrying their national flags. The sight was breathtaking, with colors and pageantry that seemed to bring the ancient abbey to life. Each step of the procession had been rehearsed countless times to ensure perfection. Catherine gently placed her hands on her children's shoulders, reminding them that this was the moment they had prepared for. Prince George sat up straighter, understanding the importance of what was happening. Princess Charlotte's eyes sparkled with excitement as she watched the beautiful procession unfold before them. Prince Louis gripped his small program tightly, trying his best to sit still and quiet. The Archbishop of Canterbury appeared in his golden vestments, carrying the symbols of his office that would play crucial roles in the coronation ceremony. Behind him came other senior church officials, their voices joining in ancient chants that had been sung at royal coronations for centuries. The sound echoed through the stone arches, creating an atmosphere that felt both sacred and magical. When King Charles III finally appeared at the entrance to the abbey, a hush fell over the assembled guests. He looked dignified and solemn in his crimson velvet robe, understanding the weight of the moment that would transform him from heir to sovereign. Queen Camilla walked beside him, elegant in her own ceremonial robes, ready to be crowned queen consort. The procession moved slowly down the abbey's nave, allowing everyone present to witness this historic moment. William felt a surge of pride watching his father approach the altar with such dignity and grace. This was the culmination of a lifetime of preparation and service, the moment Charles had been preparing for since he was a young child. As his father passed their seats, William and his family stood and bowed respectfully, along with every other person in the abbey. The gesture showed their recognition of Charles as their king, but also expressed the deep personal love and respect they felt for him as a father and grandfather. The ancient rituals began with prayers and hymns that had been part of coronation ceremonies for over 1,000 years. The Archbishop of Canterbury's voice carried clearly through the abbey as he spoke the traditional words, asking for God's blessing on the new king and his reign. Each word was carefully chosen and had been spoken at every coronation in British history. Prince George watched with fascination as the ceremonial regalia was presented to his grandfather. The ancient crown jewels, including the magnificent St. Edward's crown, gleamed in the abbey's specially arranged lighting. He had learned about these precious objects in his lessons, but seeing them being used in their actual purpose was completely different. The moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. King Charles III took his place in the coronation chair, the same ancient seat that had been used for royal coronation since 1308. The chair itself was a piece of living history, having supported kings and queens through centuries of British heritage. Catherine held her breath as the Archbishop of Canterbury lifted St. Edward's crown above her father-in-law's head. The crown, made of solid gold and decorated with precious stones, represented not just the monarchy but the entire history and tradition of the British nation. The weight of responsibility it represented was enormous. As the crown was lowered onto King Charles III's head, the abbey erupted in a tremendous shout of "God save the King." The sound seemed to shake the ancient stones themselves, and many in the congregation had tears in their eyes as they witnessed this historic moment. Prince William felt his own eyes fill with emotion as he watched his father officially become king. The ceremony continued with the crowning of Queen Camilla, creating two new monarchs in a single unforgettable moment. The children watched with wide eyes, understanding that they were witnessing something that very few people in history have ever seen. This was not just a ceremony, but the beginning of a new chapter in their country's story. The sound of church bells began to ring out across London, announcing to the entire nation and the world that Britain had a new king. Inside the abbey, the newly crowned monarchs received the homage of their subjects, officially beginning the reign of King Charles III. As the coronation ceremony reached its climax, Prince William rose from his seat along with the rest of the congregation to witness one of the most moving moments in royal history. His father, now officially King Charles III, sat regally in the coronation chair wearing the magnificent St. Edward's crown, transformed from heir to sovereign in a ceremony that connected them directly to over 1,000 years of British monarchy. The moment for the homage arrived, and William knew that he would be the first to approach his father as the new king. This was not just a ceremonial duty, but a deeply personal moment between a son and his father. As the heir to the throne, William's pledge of loyalty would carry special significance for everyone watching around the world. Catherine watched with pride and emotion as her husband walked slowly toward the altar. She could see the weight of the moment in his careful steps and dignified posture. This was the man she had married, stepping into his role as the direct heir to the crown that now rested on his father's head. The children sat perfectly still beside her, understanding that something very important was happening. Prince George observed his father with intense concentration, knowing that one day he would make this same walk to pledge loyalty to his own father as king. The young prince was learning about duty, service, and the continuity of the monarchy through this powerful example. His great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had once watched her father make similar pledges, and now he was witnessing the same tradition continuing. When William reached his father, he knelt before the coronation chair and spoke the ancient words of homage that had been used for centuries. His voice carried clearly through the abbey as he pledged his loyalty and service to King Charles III. The sight of a son kneeling before his father, who was now his sovereign, moved many in the congregation to tears. King Charles III looked down at his eldest son with visible emotion. This moment represented not just the formal recognition of his kingship, but also the continuation of their family's dedication to serving the British people. When William rose and kissed his father's cheek, it was both a personal gesture of love and a public symbol of the monarchy's strength and unity. Catherine felt tears in her eyes as she watched this touching exchange between her husband and father-in-law. She understood that this moment would be remembered and discussed by historians for generations. The sight of the heir apparent pledging his loyalty to the newly crowned king created a powerful image of stability and continuance for the monarchy. Princess Charlotte whispered quietly to her mother. Asking about what was happening, Catherine explained in simple terms that Daddy was promising to help and support Grandpa Charles in his new job as king. The little princess nodded seriously, beginning to understand the important roles her family members played in their country's life. Prince Louis, despite his young age, seemed to sense the importance of what he was witnessing. He had been remarkably well-behaved throughout the long ceremony, and his parents were proud of how he was handling such a significant and formal occasion. His serious expression showed that he understood this was different from other family gatherings. Other members of the royal family followed William in making their pledges of loyalty. Each moment added to the ceremony's power and significance, creating a public display of the monarchy's unity and strength. The ancient words echoed through the Abbey, connecting this modern coronation to centuries of British royal tradition. The newly crowned Queen Camilla received her own recognition and homage, officially taking her place as the king's consort and partner in service to the nation. Her dignity and grace throughout the ceremony showed her readiness to take on the responsibilities that came with her new royal position. As the formal homage concluded, the royal family returned to their seats for the final portions of the coronation service. The sight of King Charles III and Queen Camilla seated on their thrones, wearing their crowns and holding the symbols of royal authority, created an image that would define the beginning of the new reign. The children had witnessed something extraordinary, the peaceful transfer of royal authority from one generation to the next, carried out with all the pageantry and tradition that made such ceremonies so powerful and meaningful. They had seen their grandfather become their king, and their father formally accept his role as the future monarch. This was more than just a ceremony. It was their family's contribution to the continuing story of the British monarchy, played out before the eyes of the world in the most famous church in Britain, surrounded by nearly 1,000 years of royal history and tradition. As the final hymns of the coronation service filled Westminster Abbey with glorious sound, Prince William and his family knew they were about to step out into a world that had changed forever. The man who had entered the Abbey as King Charles III in waiting was now their crowned sovereign, and they were leaving as the official representatives of the monarchy's future. The magnificent recessional began with King Charles III and Queen Camilla, now wearing their crowns and carrying the symbols of royal authority, processing slowly down the Abbey's nave. The sight was breathtaking, with the newly crowned monarchs moving with dignity and grace past the assembled dignitaries who had witnessed this historic transformation. Catherine gathered her children close as they prepared to follow in the royal procession. Princess Charlotte smoothed her white dress carefully, while Prince George straightened his tie with the seriousness that had marked his behavior throughout the ceremony. Prince Louis, tired but still trying his best to behave properly, held his mother's hand tightly. As they walked down the ancient aisle, the Wales family could feel the eyes of the world upon them. They were no longer just attending a ceremony. They were now part of the newly established royal hierarchy, with William officially recognized as heir to a king rather than an heir in waiting. The significance of this change would affect every aspect of their public and private lives. The sound of church bells rang out across London as they approached the great west door of the Abbey. Outside, hundreds of thousands of people had gathered in the streets, parks, and along the processional route, all waiting to celebrate their new king and the royal family. The noise of the crowd could be heard even through the thick stone walls of the ancient building. Stepping out into the bright daylight, the family was greeted by a wall of sound as the crowds cheered and waved their flags. The sight of so many people celebrating filled Catherine with emotion, knowing that all these individuals had come to share in this historic moment. The children's faces lit up with excitement as they saw the massive celebration that had taken over London. Their state cars were waiting to take them on the return journey, but this time the route would be different. As members of the newly established royal court, they would travel as part of the official coronation procession, giving more people the chance to see them and celebrate the beginning of the new reign. Prince George waved carefully to the crowds as they drove through the streets of London, understanding that people wanted to see him as the future king. His training and education had prepared him for public attention, but this level of celebration and interest was something entirely new for the 10-year-old prince. The decorations throughout London seemed even more vibrant and exciting on their return journey. Giant screens in Trafalgar Square and other locations showed highlights of the coronation ceremony to people who hadn't been able to get close to the Abbey. Street parties were beginning in neighborhoods across the capital, with people of all ages joining in the celebration. Catherine reflected on the incredible day they had experienced as their car moved through the celebrating crowds. She had witnessed her father-in-law's transformation into king, seen her husband formally acknowledged as heir apparent, and watched her children experience one of the most important days in modern British history. The children were beginning to understand that their lives would be different now. Their grandfather was no longer just Grandpa Charles. He was King Charles III, the head of state for the United Kingdom and 15 other countries. Their father was no longer just the heir apparent. He was now the heir to a reigning monarch, which carried additional responsibilities and public interest. As they approached their final destination, the family could see that the celebrations would continue long into the evening. People had traveled from across Britain and around the world to be part of this historic day, and their joy and excitement filled every street they passed through. The coronation of King Charles III was complete, and the Wales family had played their part in one of the most important ceremonies in British royal history. They had arrived at Westminster Abbey as senior members of the royal family, but they were leaving as key figures in the newly established reign. The ancient traditions had been observed, the crown had been placed, and the monarchy continued its journey through history. As their car carried them away from Westminster Abbey, Prince William, Catherine, and their 3 children knew they had witnessed something that would be remembered for centuries, and they had been honored to play their part in this magnificent chapter of British royal heritage. The celebration would continue, but for the Wales family, this coronation day would forever remain one of the most significant and moving experiences of their lives, marking the moment when they became part of the court of King Charles III.